one particular instance where you mentioned that you were working on this one project that wanted to sort of have the Mauritian map on a poster and sort of pin off every single place where a Mauritian, whether they're a man or woman or probably a transsexual gender, to sort of
Mm-hmm.
have plotted on the Mauritian map where they've been harassed.
So, the whole idea behind the project is actually to make people aware that, street harassment is a reality, because usually what happen is people just, put those things under the rug, and people don't really talk about it in Mauritius, like especially in Mauritius. So it's so normalized that people, like, it's a really uncomfortable truth to say that, in Mauritius every day, women, people who identify as women, or um gender non-conforming people, so they are harassed every day on the street. So what we're planning to do is we are, like, trying to put up a map and telling people to anonymously pin all the areas where they have been sexually harassed on the street. So this, we think that it's going to generate conversation, and open more conversation on this issue in Mauritius.
And I think it's an absolutely like gorgeous way to go about it, to be honest. And like, I know it's probably like very quick to kind of like start off with that, but I was like so interested and intrigued and engaged when you sort of shared that piece of information with me, because it really reminds me of that road traffic safety campaign that the Mauritian government, past, future, and present, that has been trying to do with regards to, okay, cool, these are the black spots, you've got to be safe over here, this is the wrong band and stuff like that. And I think it would really relate
Mhm.
to the Mauritian psyche, because they've sort of seen like a common safety campaign in the past. But where
Yeah.
is it going to be? Where can people find this map that they can kind of like paint off? Is it going to be on a website? Where is it going to be?
So we're planning to do it, like, obviously online, and especially on social media, because that's where most of the people are. So basically, it's gonna be a bit like the Me Too movement, but differently, in terms of people are just going to pin. So at the end of the day, hopefully, we're going to get a map, and it's gonna be like pinned with red paints all over it, and hopefully this project will really encourage our leaders and policymakers to actually, like, push forward legislation and enforce them towards street harassment in Mauritius. And it's a really difficult project, because it's really hard for people to come forward and say that, I have been harassed here and there. So it's really going to be difficult to get people to talk about it, and to encourage others to actually share it and use the map. You know what I mean? Because it's the same as Me Too Mauritius. So it takes one person, and then it creates a cascade effect. So one person shares it, and then everybody keeps sharing the story. So we hope that it's gonna, like, be similar, but it can really backfire, in terms of people are gonna say that, we're actually painting Mauritius in a, like, really bad light, and there are gonna be people who are going to disagree. But I personally think that street harassment is a really big issue, and we need to address it, right?
I am a big advocate for addressing this issue. Street harassment is something that is extremely close to me in ways that um probably at times feel like I fail to understand it myself. Like why was it like such a pertinent thing to me growing up? But at the same time, when I kind of reflect back on my journey of my safety in the public spaces that we have in Mauritius, it definitely wasn't 100% safe. And I really like how you mentioned the backlash that the Me Too movement in Mauritius itself received, and how there is going to be disagreement with this project that you're going ahead with, which is like literally plotting out every single space that was unsafe for people when it comes to the streets of Mauritius. Um, I'm always concerned about, I mean, not concerned really, but
Mhm.
the Me Too movement is something that we saw like really kind of like blooming into existence some
Mhm.
4 to 5 years ago on the international forum platform.
Mhm.
Do you think it came a bit late to Mauritius?
Yeah, absolutely. We were actually like so late to this movement. Like, I think the Me Too movement came into Mauritius like last year, right? It was like last year that people
Yeah,
started sharing
yeah,
stories online.
yeah.
Was it? Yeah. So it came really late, honestly, and I don't know why. Is it because people are really reluctant to report, or is it like, mm, I don't know, I don't know, like why so late? Like why not like when we had the UK and the Me Too UK, Me Too India, and when the Me Too movement happened, loads of countries they actually changed so much of the laws around street harassment, gender-based violence. But Mauritius, I don't really see it that way here because um it's a movement, but in Mauritius, people started sharing stories, and then it was over. Like we don't really hear Me Too in Mauritius now, so it's over now. It was just a phase. So I don't know why people are not really um considering like the impact of people's stories in Mauritius. Like you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, like I so understand what you mean to say, because I myself have been struggling in trying to understand why is it that Mauritius tends to be very late when it comes to picking up social conversations. And I'm starting to understand that probably it's because we're not used to having conversations in a way that is public. And probably mass media in Mauritius has a lot to play in that, because we have this tendency in Mauritius where if you've got woes, if you've got complaints, it all bottlenecks, on like popular radio shows. But when it comes to having these conversations that are very, like dinner table conversations, living room conversations, a conversation that you can have on a public forum debate platform, those sort of seem to be missing. And what I found quite interesting as well is even when people sort of came out and gave their like stories, there was a substantial number of people who disbelieved them.
yeah, that's really common, because maybe usually what happened is if somebody is like talking about their experiences, people are really quick to say, you know what, we don't believe you, or it happened so many years ago, like why did you not say anything? And these people who say that, I think they really need to understand the depth of sexual violence and mental health, how it really affects everything, and the reasons why people don't report immediately, for instance. So people are really quick to judge and especially blame the victims or survivors, if I may say. So people are really quick and to blame and to judge instead of listening to them and like the way forward, like how can we encourage more people to report, how can we change the laws so that we can like adapt to that change. So um social media has been a really powerful tool where I see now teenagers like age 16 to 17, they are actually using social media to voice their opinions on social issues. But I remember when I was a teen, um, it was not really the norm. So you don't see teenagers going on social media and posting what they think about sexual violence, for example. But I can see now that there is this trend among the youth of today that they are really opening up conversation on mental health, on sexual violence, and street harassment. So in some way, um, we're starting to have conversation online, and I really hope that it really the conversation we are having online changes the way we have like offline conversation, like you mentioned, dinner conversation, like parents talking to their kids about consent, about like implication, the street harassment, like we were saying. So, and especially we need men and boys to have conversation about consent with their friends, because it's really easy to say that we are allies and everything, but in terms of street harassment, exactly what happened if there's like a group of boys who are harassing a girl on the street? Like, do we see like their friends calling them out? Like, these are the kind of conversation we need to be having, I think.
I think you very rightly pointed out, because even in terms of the disbelief of, I call it the woman experience. Because it's
Hmm.
easy to think that every citizen of a country, of an island, has the exact same experience when you come from a position of privilege. But the truth and the reality is that everybody is living a very different experience by their race, by their gender, or just by their pure political opinion as well. And it's quite interesting, like, as to how the people who also invalidated a lot of women's safety experiences, and the kind of violation that we saw through the hashtag Me Too Mauritius movement, is something, it probably came from people who came from a pedestal of privilege, because they were not willing to understand or believe that these are experiences that women are living on a daily basis, if not probably multiple times in a single day. um,
Yep.
what I really appreciated in your discourse as well right now is how you said, sure, we had like a brief moment of the Me Too movement last year. We had the Telegram episode that sort of, exploded earlier this year. I think it was around July or August, if I'm not kind of like getting that wrong. But you said
Hmm.
that what sustains what happens after this, right? Because it's easy to have that kind of like, okay, cool, we had like a hashtag moment, we had like an explosion of rage because the Telegram scandal sort of like came out. But what's next? What happens after that,
Hmm.
and what really goes to sustain that? What do you have to say
So,
about
especially with regards to the Telegram issue that happened in Mauritius, we saw a lot of people, typing on their keyboards about, this is right, this is wrong, they should not have done this, blah, 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 and like all sorts of like views and opinions. But what really happened after that? Like, there's nothing, because it's sort of, it did, like there was a peak, and then it's over. We don't really, did we keep talking about, consent, revenge porn? Did we actually like keep talking about it, or it was just like, "Oh, okay, it happened, too bad, sorry, we really sympathize," and then it's over. So there is like this need to sustain the conversation and keep the conversation flowing. We need to be able to like use the social movement to create change. And when I talk about change, I talk about, policies, I talk about law enforcement, I talk about, holding people accountable, which is really important.
it? It's a remarkable point that you make, and you would believe, or we would believe that that's the logical thing to happen, but yet like I feel like it's almost sort of like imprinted in the Mauritian gene to kind of like have a moment's conversation and just like move on after that.
Mhm.
And there's a lack of kind of like capturing that energy and that essence and that synergy of the moment to translate into a much longer, is that going to translate into policy making, you know? And I guess probably, and like you probably know this better than me, that it's a lack of expertise, it's a lack of knowing how to actually do that via frameworks, and it's also probably a matter of our lifestyles. Or most of us are family people. You kind of like just want to move on with your day. You go to work, come back. The typical lifestyle of metro boulot dodo. And all of that sort of like really, takes away from our active time to actually sustainably, continue the momentum. um if we were to talk framework, right, in terms of how can these social movements, this conversation, drain towards, the right offices, and for them to kind of listen to these voices, what's that framework? What is it that most of us are missing out as activists?
Well, you were just talking about how we just go to work and we will move on with our day. But I think that if we start to encourage kids and children from a very young age to have conversation, actually to have difficult conversation about things that people don't really talk about, it's going to be much easier. So it's it goes back to our education system, right? Because we usually in Mauritius, so it's only when you're in, I think, in upper six, so you do GP. So you don't really like lower six and upper six, right? It's only then that we're starting to talk about issues, but it's too late because it's like you're 17 and 18, and we need to have well-rounded kids that knows things like consent, sex education, and sexual violence and everything from a very young age. So in Mauritius, we don't really address these issues. We don't really talk about it. Like we don't really read about it also. That's why I heard like we don't really read about those issues. We don't really care. But it's not just about caring. Sometimes, especially the youth of today, I think they're very driven. They have like so much energy. They want change. They want to see change, but they don't really get a platform to voice out and to speak up. And the only thing they have is probably social media, but we don't really give them a safe space to voice out what they have to say and to learn, especially because those things that we were just talking about, they actually like decide and have like different types of opinion in people. These pave the way for them to when they grow up, they have a well-rounded like global perspective on things. So we don't really inculcate that in our kids, and I think that's really like really important. I can't really stress like how important is it, right? So I don't think we're like bad activists. I just think that we need like platforms. We need safe spaces, especially because usually what happens when you're like 15 and you're like posting something on Facebook, for example, on a social issue, you have like people like elders who are going to comment and tell you like you don't know what you're talking about. You're only 15. Like you have those kind of like feedback, but
Just, yeah.
like people are just gonna stand and say, like go to school, you don't know what you're talking about. But that's not really the way to go, because those social issues, they actually affect them more than they actually affect us, if we can see it in that way.
Cool. Okay, great. You know, it's really really cool that you say that a platform is probably what youngsters need. to kind of like talk about it more. And I think this has to do a lot with visibility. And I reckon that the hashtag Me Too movement in Mauritius, or even just the fact that you get a little bit of media coverage here and there, does sort of like um, provide that visibility. But obviously, we have to agree and admit that that visibility is not 100%
Yep.
a daily thing. Like you don't have a media coverage every single day telling to people that this is the number of people that have got sexually harassed in the streets today. Like
Hmm.
that's not the kind of
Yeah.
thing that we have happening. And I really really believe in that map, that interactive map that you want to bring across, because I feel like it's such a live feedback in terms of what's actually the state of matters in terms of street harassment in Mauritius. But I probably want to spend some time to stress why it's so important to provide a safety zone and to provide public safety to women, especially in Mauritian streets. And if you allow me that to kind of share on it, I think a lot of time coming from places of privilege in the patriarchal society that we live in, I think
Hmm.
men or probably male policymakers or a system that kind of like looks at predominantly um, safety from a very masculine perspective tend to forget that spaces are not always safe for women when a woman can't really step out of her house wearing whatever she wants to wear and not having to attribute provocation or non-provocation to what she's
Hmm.
wearing. And at times, we probably know of so many cases where it's not even about skin show and you still get harassed in the
Hmm.
streets. And I think,
Yep.
like, to me, especially growing up in Mauritius, I know this as a first-hand experience.
Hmm.
Younger girls are such praise to much older sexual predators in the streets. And the thing is that when you're still 14 years old, when you're still 10 years old, when you're still 16 years old, and even probably when you're already 21, you don't have the guts to really come home or like to go any. Where would you? We're even told you're supposed to kind of go to seek help or report, right? And it's really uncool. It's really not nice to have to like go through all of that. Like taking public transport is such a traumatic
Hmm.
and stressful experience. Like ask any woman in Mauritius. Like I can just like literally say that with my
Hmm.
hand on my heart. Um, Even like this, like for me I find it
Okay.
stupendous, like how young girls go to school feeling stressed and having to kind of like take public transport. Is it safe? Is it safe for everybody? Like you'll keep thinking, right? Even when we talk about if even if we had to think about open gyms or jogging at the park, the kind of like sexualization that happens about having a flexible body in a public sphere is still like such a traumatic experience that women have to kind of like endure with those glares and then those stares. I just wanted to really stress like why is this topic so important, right? Because it's very easy to kind of like be, oh yeah, street harassment, another social cause, another social justice movement. We heard it, it's done. But these are why like reasons as to why I think it's such an important conversation to have. And I wanted to open sort of the floor to you to share as to why is sexual predation in the streets such an important issue to address, and why is it that we're not actively doing anything about it still.
You know, it's a it's a really it's a really weird thing in Mauritius where, parents want their daughters to become doctors and lawyers and engineers, but we still have we still live in a country where the streets are not really safe. So, and people don't really see an issue about it because there is this like normalization of street harassment. So it's so normalized in our society. It's just like people refuse to talk about it, especially if a girl, for example, like she goes home and she tells her parent, like, that happened, like somebody harassed me on the streets, and loads of parents are going to tell them, like, just don't go out, so that's really like that's a really big issue for me because Like just imagine a world where you can't like go for a walk, or you can't like go for a run because some people on the street will harass you. And it's not something that happen like once in a while. Like honestly speaking, when I was like 18, 17, or something, I used to like take the like public transport to school, and every day I would have people on the street catcalling me, like singing like romantic songs, men stopping their car to beep. Like just imagine that, and you have like all sorts of like comments, people telling you to smile, you have like people commenting on your appearance, on your clothes, and there is this staring, like you're working on the street, and somebody just like stares like really uncomfortably at you, and you know what that person is doing, and there's this tiny moment, like that person is like really objectifying you. Nobody knows anything, it's just that the person is staring at you, but the emotional impact on you, it's really big, and people
Horrendous.
refuse. Yes, and people refuse to acknowledge that. They tell you it's normal, like it happens, it's bound to happen. Especially the bound to happen things. For example, if you're like wearing a yoga pant or tank tops or a dress or a short, people are gonna be like, yeah, but you're showing skin. What do you expect? And this must change, because it's such a like victim blaming mindset that people like are growing up with, you know. And as you mentioned earlier, it's not just about clothes. It's about freedom. It's about safety. It's about making sure that our streets are safe for women and girls, right?
Definitely. And like honestly, like I think the one thing that pricks at me the most is that I'm I'm turning 25 in like a month, and I've lived 19 years on the island, and my memories attached with public safety is just traumatic. And
Hmm.
still we're expected to sort of like live life as though, like, well,
Yeah,
everything is safe.
exactly. We're supposed to like live in like an illusion. Like we're supposed to act like it's normal. Like it's not, right? Like harassment is not normal. And
I was sort of looking for literature around street harassment in Mauritius because I was really keen because I was like, it can't possibly be that sexual street harassment in Mauritius is such a big thing. Like I just share a snippet of my experience being around the world. Like I don't feel more unsafe anywhere else when it comes to streets than I do in Mauritius, and that's
yeah,
not
that's
a good thing, you know. And
mhm.
definitely, like I'm probably not adding, a lot of previously colonized countries in this list, like Thailand or India or Brazil, and I've probably only been in a very urban context in whatever cities I've visited in the world. But that doesn't mean that Mauritius shouldn't proactively be taking steps to negating the occurrence of sexual harassment in the streets. And I think people don't really understand that sexual harassment does not have to do with somebody masturbating in front of you or somebody just
Yeah.
like putting their hand underneath your skirt. Just the fact that somebody catcalls you, that's already sexual harassment. Just the fact that somebody
Hmm.
is staring at you in an objectifying manner, like you mentioned, is sexual harassment in itself. And singing a song to you when it's not at all consentful. And people tend to say that, oh my God, but it was a compliment. Why can't you take a compliment? We're just flirting.
Oh my god. Yeah. Ugh. There is this like, I don't know where it came from, but people actually equating street harassment with like romance. Like, no, never. Like it was never a compliment. It's harassment, and it should be termed as harassment. It's not like romantic or anything. Yeah.
I think even your pets are agreeing to it.
Yeah.
um,
Um,
so in that process, I came during my research. I came across this campaign, which I felt really shameful that ashamed that I had no idea existed, and I found it like in a very interesting blog, an immersion blog actually, a blogspot blog, and the campaign was titled "Harcèlement le chemin, nous pas ouler." And I never bumped into that campaign before. It doesn't seem to have been something that was implemented nationwide. It doesn't seem to be something that you see as sticky bumps on, like like in buses or in a classroom. And I'm just wondering, um, where are we lacking? Why don't we have any sort of campaigning done when it comes to public safety in Mauritius? And I add that question together with the fact that street infrastructure in Mauritius is pretty poor as well. Bad lighting at night or just general patrolling to make sure that we have safe spaces. I'm not really sure if we need to start talking about resources to make sure that safety exists, both for men and women for that matter. But in terms of a simple nationwide communications campaign, that street harassment is a bad thing. wh- why don't we? I mean, I'm very connected to like campaigns that happen in Mauritius, but I've never seen any kind of campaign like that. Why is that not happening? Why? What do you think?
I think we need to acknowledge, like we need to tell ourselves that street harassment is a reality. It exists. Like as long as we keep telling ourselves that it's nothing, it's just the norm, it's normal, we're never going to be able to actually make the streets safer for girls. And that's the main issue, I think. And when we talk about street harassment, we need to address that. We need to address that we need more people, like we need more bystander intelligence. It's what I call it. So we need people to say that, I saw how you actually like catcall this girl. This is not the way, like you can't harass somebody. Like if we had at least one people telling somebody that, like in a public transport, like it would mean so much, right? But nobody like talks about it. That's the thing. That's the thing. We need to start acknowledging that it exists. And after doing that only, then we will be able to address it.
I think it's really
Do
cool
you
how
see
you
what
mentioned. No, no, definitely, and I think it's really cool how you say that there has to be an acknowledgement at all levels, not just in terms of our single being or our families or the society at large, but also from the our I don't know, like if you call it the policymakers or just the ones who are responsible for making public spaces a safe place for all of us. But also, you went to mention that there has to be an empowerment of the bystanders to act as
yes.
intervent, like to intervene and to always be sort
Mhm.
of like at least have the propensity to be like, I'll be a witness for what just happened. But let's probably also talk about the empowerment for someone to even report that they've been harassed in the streets, right? And I've been asking this to my Facebook audience so much. I've kept asking for it myself. I literally just have to kind of like call a police station and literally ask them the question of what I should do. But here's my question: if I get catcalled in the streets in Mauritius, or if I get harassed, right, in any manner whatsoever, whether it's somebody staring at me objectifyingly or starting to kind of like follow me or sort of like, because I've had people putting their hands underneath my skirts as well. I've had girlfriends who've had people sitting next to them and pulling the penis out and starting to masturbate right in the public, transport like that. That there's such common occurrences in the country.
Yep.
um, what should someone do as a victim then? How first you probably would take some time to even go and report, but what's the process? Like, does it exist? Is What's up? Like, what should I react? What should I do from a law perspective?
So, this like usually what happened is we do have laws, but we do need to change the mindset as well because it goes hand in hand. So even if we have a law, like, are people empowered enough to use that law and report, right? Are they? We don't know. Speaking about girls, like, it's really hard for them because there are so many barriers for them to go and report, right? So it's not just about do we have the law or do we not have the law. It's also about, how do we enforce it? How do we make it accessible for people to use it? How do we empower them to use it? Because we've been doing a lot of like lower empowerment on Speak, on She Rewrites the Law. We talk about, how we have like legal provision for women and they can like rely on it. But or like we can't actually force somebody to go and report, right? We can't do that. We can just like advise somebody. But at the end of the day, it really depends on yourself, like if you want to report or not. And then the question that we have to ask ourselves is, can they report? Like, are they empowered to report? How do they do it? Because usually in public transport, or like if you're walking on the street, like somebody catcalls you, and then like they are gone, right? They are not like they are gone, and even in public transport, like they are gone. You don't really know who they are, right? So in terms of reporting, I don't know, we should like probably like ask a lawyer, but in terms of reporting it becomes really difficult. So there are many barriers, especially now. If you report it, like, what happened then? There are so many implications that um is tied to it, right? For example, one thing I should mention that, especially some like usually when you're on the street and you have been harassed, you should do what's best for you, right? Because sometimes you're in a really unsafe place, and if you like start to call them out, it can really escalate and it can really like lead to violence, for example. So usually people just like, they start to walk faster, they try to avoid those situations. But at the end of the day, we can't really blame, women and girls for not reporting, right? Because we don't really have safeguards for them.
No, definitely, like that's very well put together, to be like, honestly, like very well put together. Because reporting, it also comes from a place of privilege, because as you mentioned, it's also a matter of mindset, right? I know a lot of young girls who would rather not report because it's too much of a hassle, or probably them reporting it would mean that they would have to involve their families, that, oh hey, I got harassed in the streets, and then it brings up conversation from parents and larger relatives, that what were you doing in the streets at that time? Well, like, what were you wearing? It's probably your fault anyway. But there's also something as part of the system, right, where it's a lot like, you might be reporting something at a police station, but would your report be taken seriously? Would you be asked to sort of produce, witnesses, or would you just be, banalized that, oh, such things happen anyway? Because we kind of
Mm,
saw it even during the Telegram episode, right, when people sort of called up law enforcement powers, and they were like, this is happening, and it's been like 3 days that the whole of the internet digital world is talking about something, and a lot of law officials in the country had no idea what was happening, and they had no idea how to tackle it as well. So I really think what you mentioned about the acknowledgement of the system, in the system itself, that these are things that are happening, and we need to be prepared for it in a way that matters, and not just because the law exists, but also empowering law officials themselves as well as victims and bystanders to know what to
Mhm.
do in that direction.
Yes.
And I think that that's a really good one that you sort of brought forward. Here's my question though from this. I was reading up a bit on the law in India specifically because India is a country where street harassment is it just incubates it. I feel
Mm.
and that's not to kind of shame the country or the culture, but it is very prominent. Like a quick look at a lot of previous generation Bollywood movies would show how much it was normalized to sort of
Yeah.
harass or like
True.
catcall, or how the idea of me giving attention to a girl that was totally uncalled for is heavily romanticized, right?
Yes.
And we should probably not also kind of like just give the blame to one particular gender, specifically men, because there are also a lot of women who see such gestures as being compliments, and that's not to
Mm.
be not acknowledged either. However, while I was researching around the law, I saw that in the Indian law, they made specific provisions for literal words that, okay, if you've heard this
Mhm.
word addressed in in your regard, this is literally something that is condemnable. And like how you say that even if you're reporting, there are two instances that can happen, right? Even if you're super empowered, and even if you have your full support of your family, even if you're reporting to the police station, right? When you come out after you've reported somebody, acid attacks, threats,
Mm.
rape threats, or probably you're going to have then the family of the offender coming and knocking at your door. Oh, please don't report my son, or don't report the offender because you're going to destroy their future, and defamation and everything,
Yeah.
right? And like a lot of cases like that.
Yeah.
And I think that Indian law has progressed a lot in that regard, that they're even starting to make provisions for such things. But whereas when you look at sexual harassment law in Mauritius, it's probably just like what, a couple of lines. um
Mm.
to what extent do you feel there has to be a revisiting of those laws, and kind of like make them a bit more sophisticated and targeted to Mauritian society in a way that really acknowledges the kind of things that happen in the streets?
Definitely. I think India has a great initiative. Like you said that they have specific words in their legislation, which is a really good way. Like
In
that's a
various
really
languages, and it's a
yeah.
country of over 300 recognized languages.
And definitely, I think that Mauritius can really have something like this. And we need to, as you mentioned, cater the law and fit it into the Mauritian culture. So we also could have a very like detailed piece of legislation, not just a couple of lines, like you said, and that would be really, really helpful. But I think the problem here, not the problem, but I think what I want to highlight here is that we're talking about verbal abuse, right? Verbal street abuse. So there is this mindset again that people do not realize that verbal abuse is in fact abuse. So
It
just
is.
because there are no blows, wounds, or physical act, it doesn't mean that it's not abuse. It's still abuse, right? So
Here's something else that I read, and it would be really cool to have your opinion on it. There was a piece of research that was conducted, and for the life of me, I can't remember the references right now. But it said something like, if men were more empowered to talk about their own street harassment stories,
yeah,
it would accelerate the process of getting public safety, which is a sad thing because it doesn't need to take only one gender to have to do that, right? Or probably what's perceived
yeah,
to be the superior
true.
gender.
Mm.
But it had a different angle to the study, and it said that it's because you're joining more hands to the cause, and it's because the fact that men themselves can acknowledge that they're getting harassed in the streets would make them realize that action needs to be taken too, and they would join into the whole movement, because it is a thing. And I remember I saw a meme around it, and before I let you tell me what are your thoughts on it, I'll just share what the meme was about. It said something like, um, men are always, some men rather, are probably always saying that, oh, how come like you're the ones who are getting harassed in the streets? um it's not like we don't get harassed as well. Stop like asking for too much. And like that was the line of thought of the meme. And then somebody just replied to that comment, and they were like, yeah, if and this is me, honestly, I have to put a disclaimer. I'm literally speaking from a very heteronormative bias right now.
Yeah.
But it was like, yeah, but if men are getting harassed, they're getting harassed by other men. They're
Yeah.
not getting harassed by women. And these are the kind of things that are very subtle and you need to start checking. But I'll let you kind of like tell me what is your opinion about, if men were also to start talking about the harassment stories, um, things would probably accelerate in the right direction.
I think this question could be like sum up in two words, and it's male privilege. Uh, because yeah, it's basically male privilege, right? So like an issue becomes important only if men are affected by it. Otherwise, like people don't like sufficiently talk about it. So that's basically it. And but like I honestly think that we need men to join this conversation as well. Not necessarily because they also get harassed on the streets by like mostly other men,
Yeah,
but because like it's something that like really affects all of us. Like if we say it, like from like if we see the bigger picture, and usually with women, and when I say women, I say like people who identify as women as well. So usually with them, um there is this like victim blaming. We live in a very like victim blaming culture. So usually when women are involved, like when we say that women have been harassed on the street, there is this question that like immediately follows, like, oh, but what was she wearing? Why was she like on the streets? Like, she was asking for it, blah blah blah. Like we have this question that come up really easily. But with men, if a man is saying, I like harass on the street, nobody will be like, oh, but what were you wearing, right? So it's different the way we treat women experience and we treat men experience in general. It's really different. But I think we need to start we definitely need to like involve men in the discussion, as I said earlier, but we need to talk about sexual harassment in a very like dinner conversation, as you mentioned again earlier. We need women need to be able to like talk about their experience to men and tell them, every time I have to go out, I need to like see what I'm wearing. When I walk on the street, I need to be fully like alert, and I need to hold my keys in my hand. I need to like um you know be on watch, and if somebody is following me, I need to like walk faster. I need to like talk loudly on the phone when I'm in a dark road, for example. So these are these things that women, like men, need to know. Like they need to know their privilege. They need to see that um, for women, their experience, like in terms of public safety, is way different than men. But speaking of that, um, I had like conversation with my guy friends, and we talk a lot about women issues. We talk about we talk a lot about street harassment as well, and we talk about how certain issues affect women. And I've seen them like by like having conversation with them, they tend to see like the seriousness of the issue. They tend to see that yes, it happens, right? So I think there is like hope for change, because and you know it's the same logic, like by speaking, like by women talking about experience, there are we're able to have men join in and step up and um fight with us, if not like with us, in this issue. And it's not just about our male friends, and it's also about um male policymakers, right? Like, and in terms of, we have like men making laws, and if we talk more about it, we have conversation about it, it's gonna like really impact change. That's why I feel personally, I think we deserve better in terms of public safety. It's a really, yeah, yeah.
Like for me, I just can't believe that in the Mauritian culture, law enforcement has always been quite problematic in terms of the law is pretty much there to support citizens, but to what extent it's actually in carried out or rolled out to its full effectiveness is a whole different conversation when we talk about the Mauritian understanding of the law and the protection that we derive from it. Um, there was something that quite struck me during the 2 past years that we've had on social media from a feminism wave perspective, or just from an amplification of female voices around Mauritius. We've had the Me Too movement. There's a very popular group even on Facebook that is doing an amazing job when it comes to at least sort of like regrouping female voices and like us talking about our worldview and how the world is for us and how we should be making it more gender sensitive for both men, women, and all genders included. But those conversations are happening in on platforms that sure is collectively creating an education for us citizens. Do you think though that the fact that a lot of change makers who've got the power to actually enact change, the fact that they are not on social media, the fact that they are not on digital, the fact that they are not looking at the monitoring of digital platforms, we are not being able to access them. And what I mean by this question is that probably the fact that the institutions who ought to kind of be part of these conversations, the fact that they were absent from digital media is decelerating the rate at which we could shift um, our ideas of how we can make things better from just online to an offline real world action. Would institutions and organizations being more active on social media be a power of change, you reckon?
Definitely, digital activism is something that's like been here now for a few years now, like for a few years. And you're right, when you say that we are not reaching like some people because they're like upset from social media itself. And the conversation, like the question we must be telling ourselves is, how do we actually reach them, in the Mauritian context, right? But that's a very good question, how do we actually reach people who are like not on social media?
Sorry to cut you. It is something to think about, and it's also something to think about in terms of private media that is a bit more accessible to the variety of generations that they have in their audience set, right? And I find it quite interesting how a lot of prime time conversations that happen in a lot of private media is still very male focused and is still not addressing the kind of movements that you see happening online as such. Wouldn't that also be another sort of um, um, weapon to add in our armory of fighting for this
Mhm.
social justice?
Yeah, that's really true because I just remembered something about the meeting Mauritius. I remember like I was telling I think my uncle or something, I was telling him about the Me Too, the hashtag Me Too Mauritius, and he was like, "What? What is that?" I've never heard of that. Like, loads of people don't know, like, what is the Me Too movement. They don't know about it, and like, how do we actually talk about it, discuss about it, if people are not really aware of it? So it's online. It's something that are not really accessible to those people. And especially if we're talking about digital campaign, some people think that digital campaign have less value because they are online. But imagine how, like, how can we, like, there's so many people we can reach online, like, how much impact we can actually make. So it's not just about traditional and mainstream media and social media. It's about the change, because the Me Too movement started as an online campaign, but eventually it even went to courts, so to parliament. So they drafted bills, acts of parliament. But Mauritius, I don't know, why are we not ready for that? That's a really, really good question. I'm gonna think about it, right?
I
Why
I
are we
think
not
there's a
ready?
lethargy. There is a lethargy at all levels, right? Because if like the way I think around it, okay, just imagine this picture, and this is probably like really roseate and very idealistic and very unicornish right now, but just think about it, okay? If you have, and I'm probably putting too much of expectations and too much of a burden on private media right now, but it's almost like they act like they are these, bottlenecks, like those saviors of, like, we want to talk about everything wrong happening in the country, and we want to talk about, like, like basically informing or whatever. But I'm in no way bashing the fact that they should continue doing what they're doing. But just think about it from a very, feminist perspective, or you don't have to be a like labeled feminist for it either, but just think of this. Me Too movement happens. I'm an editor in chief, or I'm part of, I want to sustain a business model. I'm looking at the Gen Z, like the Gen Zs and the millennials, and the people who are really sort of like, thinking about these issues, sort of like really, like reflecting on these. I'll be like, oh, why don't I develop a Me Too column that is published on a weekly basis, where every single week I feature an anonymous report of something that has
Mhm.
happened. Just a simple change in that kind of like a newspaper column does so much, like, and we're not even talking about page one, we're not even talking about the prime change, like the prime page. What if, like, on a particular radio show, when you're having like a very, interesting conversation that people tune in very quickly, when you've got these superstar personalities that come and they are entertained, um and you would have just like a bit of a cool, like, like a little bit of a, this is like a show that is probably, like, this quote of the day is brought to you by whoever XYZ brand that want to sponsor that, and it's actually something that is empowering towards, street harassment, and just like kind of educating people that, oh, are you among those people who think you can whistle at people in the streets? Know that this is not the right thing to do. And when I just think about it, just think about a world like that, and I'm just like, why did that not happen after the Me Too movement? Is there a fear? Is it that we're not thinking enough about such little things? And it's not even a matter of like waiting for policymakers to kind of like start acting on these, right? Um, I call it lethargy. What do you call it?
I call it a lack of representation in women voices. So, and more about, we're going to talk about, I don't know, this issue. But when it comes to women, it gets like really minimalized. So we don't really want to talk about it because it's uncomfortable. It's women, right? So that if we had like more women in power, this could eventually like pave the way for more women, to have their voice heard. What do you think about it?
I have a very interesting take about representation. And in the day and
Okay.
age that we're living in today, representation can very quickly become just a visual thing. And what
Hmm.
I mean by that is that I think we do have a fair share of women represented across media houses, in different spheres and industries in Mauritius, and even the parliament for that matter, right? We had like the positive discrimination that was brought into inaction to be able to have a three, like 2:1 gender ratio when we come to kind of like get candidates voted into parliament. Um, and I think that like we can't really like say that, oh, representation is not something that is being catered for or towards. Interestingly enough, if I'm not getting my statistics wrong, but like 6 to 8 years ago, gender links sort of highlighted how um, at least 6 to 7 years ago, 40% of all high positions, top level management positions in Mauritius are held by women, and that's a very very big number. 40%. That's almost nearly half towards like having that representation. But I feel that representation is one thing, and having the right representation is another. And it's very easy to just become,
Hmm.
and I'm really sort
Mm.
of pressing my words when I say that, a flower vase.
Yeah, I know. I know exactly what you mean. I'm sorry
And
to
for the
cut you.
namesake, no, 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 because I think we both agree that that's what's
Yeah.
been happening.
Yeah,
And
sorry
at
to cut
times,
you on
no,
that.
no, go.
Okay. 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 So I just remember when I was invited to speak at some event, and then somebody said that, you know what? They just invited you because you're just a woman and you're brown. I was like, this is basically it, what you were what you were talking about. So they basically called me a flower vase to my face. So they they say that, you're here because you're a woman and they needed a woman of color. That's why you're here. You're not here because you work or anything. You're here because we need to fill that representation requirement. So what you just said just like made me remember that incident. Yeah, I just want to. I just wanted to share it. Yep.
That's horrible. Like, I'm so sorry that happened. Seriously. Like, and I also know that's not just your story. It's a story of a
Yep.
lot of people. And like, I think in your story, it's very aptly shown that diversity quota is
Hmm.
not equals to inclusion. Because
Exactly.
inclusion means that somebody goes out of the way to respect what you have to say, instead of just needing you because you look a certain way or because you're filling up. It's almost like greenwashing that companies do, right? Like it's literally putting
Exactly
a label
that.
that we support XYZ, but when you actually look beneath the skin, there's no support, there's no allyship. It's just for namesake. So I think representation is important. It's very important when you're just starting out in terms of bringing more voices in a particular forum and platform. But I am convinced that in Mauritius we are way past just visual representation, way past it.
Mhm.
We're a country that is we're very young as a country, but we're also old in a way, just
Yeah.
because of like our colonization history. And we are young because of our independence, but we are old as a community. And we shouldn't fool ourselves that we're not ready for a lot of things. So that's my take on representation.
That's a very interesting perspective, and I loved hearing about it. Um, Representation for me, it's not really like black or white for me because there are so many issues that's you can't just say that you like it or you don't like it. There are many like issues to take into account. For example, like I just told you, like a story of mine, but I think that it also helps. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's not yeah, it's not completely
it's
bad.
not
And
futile.
yeah, exactly, exactly. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. it's definitely not a futile thing, but like everything good, there's a shelf life, and there's a certain life stage that an idea has to take and it has to go to. It's almost like positive discrimination is good, but there hits a point where it does what it has to
Mhm.
do, and you need to kind of like remove it because it no longer stays a healthy kind of discrimination to keep going, forward with. I actually have quite a number of um male friends who believe that this positive discrimination is not good, like it is a kind of discrimination that is against them. um and that in itself is like a discussion, but yeah. I wanted to touch upon and we probably just got like we're sort of kind of coming to an end to this conversation, which is like really fruitful, I feel. um
Mm.
Police patrolling in Mauritius, right? I'm not sure to what extent it's even carried out. I don't think police patrolling is something that is done like in every single, like super friendly or seemingly safe environments. But do you think that police patrolling is something that could be a potential contributor to reducing street harassment in Mauritius, especially in peak hours?
Of course, I think it will definitely help. But there are all like research and there are stats that prove that not only like better police patrolling, but better lighting, for example, better infrastructure, and those are the things that would greatly improve like public safety. Yep.
And you're the one who's behind She Writes the Law, right? I'm very keen to understand what led you to create the page. Probably tell us a bit about what it is, what's like your whole idea behind it. You also started a series every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. With a very popular psychologist to address mental health within the Mauritian women context, when it comes to abuse and whatnot. Just tell us a bit about She Writes the Law. What drove you to it? What is it all about?
So, she rewrites the law. Is a platform where we actually empower women and about the law. So basically, it is um the law is here, but it's usually in huge chunks of text, and it's not really user friendly for Mauritian, like for most Mauritian people to understand. So, one of our aims is to actually like simplify and translate those laws, so that we can actually empower women, right? Because there are many laws that were made to protect women, but women do not really know about it. So it's really important for them to be legally empowered. I think that's really important. And I just want to mention that we don't give legal advice. So we don't give legal advice, but we we like try to bridge the gap between like the law and the Mauritian common Mauritian women. And we started talking about mental health because it's a really like sensitive issue in Mauritius. So um we try to really like empower like the survivors, like with not just like legal empowerment, but also in terms of mental health, because um it's really important when you're like when you're going through sexual violence, which many people are, and it's really sad because we get DMs like almost every day. So we started like those series where we try to break the stigma on mental health like one shot at a time. So every Tuesday, 7 p.m., we try to talk about a specific issue on mental health. So last week, actually, we talked about there was a topic that said, I have been sexually assaulted. Should I see a therapist? And there we mentioned about a lot of things that people are not really educated on. So there are things about, we talk about the freeze and flight mechanism, why people do not report like just immediately after the incident. So we talk about the freeze and flight. So we are trying like it's a really small initiative on our behalf to try to make people understand like the effects of sexual violence, but also like the mental health impacts. Because I see like on Facebook, we talk a lot about depression, we talk a lot about anxiety, but there are still parameters within the mental health sector that people still do not talk about. For example, we have PTSD. People are still people are still very uncomfortable with that topic. They can talk about depression because we see this trend usually on social media. Like people are, which is good. People are talking about the depression, but there are certain aspects, like I mentioned, like PTSD and the freeze and flight mechanism, and things about how if you have been sexually abused as a child, how it really affects your romantic relationship, for example. So people should really have, like, I think people should have a working knowledge of trauma and how it really affects your relationship, your other areas of your life. And I think um people did not like really want to talk about it in Mauritius especially, but now I see people reaching out, and this is also one of the reason why we decided to become anonymous, because it really helps people um, you know to feel connected to our page. But it's also important for people to be able to share their experience, because I've got a lot of DMs with people like sharing their experiences, and I don't really think that it would have been possible if we were like not anonymous, because people place their trust in that. And especially with like issues like sexual assault, rape, all types of sexual violence. And I like, in terms of mental health, I think we're able to direct and connect people with mental health professional and to be able to talk more about it. It's just a beginning, but like we're trying, right? We're trying. And speaking about the low part, so usually, um, if say for example, if you're like a page on Instagram and like you tell people that I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm this and that, it's really difficult for you to be able to connect with people. You can't really like, yeah, it's really difficult, especially if I don't know, you tell people that you're a therapist, and it's really hard. But if you're like anonymous, people reach out more to you. But um because like you don't have a face, right? There is no judgment. It's a free safe zone for them to like share their experience and voice out their concern, and which is really important for us for the time being. So this is why we decided to do it like anonymously. Yep.
Yeah. And I think it's wonderful, everything that, like, Charette the law is about, and even the, like, mental health initiative, and how that's like entwined with the law aspects of things as well. And I think it's not just trying, it's more than just trying, right? Because to take the time and to volunteer and to like be, on the forefront of that's quite something. And like it almost titillates me to think about what if, and I tend to be, like very, like I need to have like an active solution that is very much implementable. And I keep thinking about, oh my god, what if the Ministry of, Gender and Family Affairs reached out to, micro influencers and nano influencers, and I'm using the term influencers in a very social media jargon of how we understand it, not in terms
Mm,
of how the word has been overly utilized or bashed
yeah,
by the Mauritian community. But and it would be like, can we collab, can we do this, can we do that? Is there something that we're missing out on? Can we better, like how do we structure things around that, and kind of like amplify the simple little things that we're doing at a level that is a bit more national, at a level that is a bit more forward thinking and innovative at the same time. And it's just that when you were just telling us about Shira's law, I was just thinking about, wow, like if this was something that could become nationwide, and obviously have, like have more resources behind it, and what and the whole gist that you can think of, that would have been so fantastic and really really
yeah.
cool.
Hmm.
And I really appreciate as well, how you shared about why it is so important to be anonymous, and how that kind of like gives, a better connection to people reaching out. That's tremendous as an insight too. um I had a question here, and I know this is one other topic that we definitely wanted to talk about because we chatted about it. Um, we of course inherit from British law, right? And we have a couple of adaptations from the Code Napoleon, which is like from French law, and a couple of areas of how we govern the island, for decades and decades now, has been tweaked and made into the Mauritian taste, specifically with the education system. They've all been tweaked here and there. And I kind of find it quite infertile why we don't do the same thing for various other sectors. But this is what there's one part of the law that a lot of countries have addressed, um, from a women, like as a women issue perspective. Um, but Mauritius has still not addressed that, or is still not dare has still not dared to kind of like have a conversation about that, and that is rape within marriage. There's a
Yeah,
lot of shying away from acknowledging that it happens. I know statistically there has been surveys going around, and I think we're sort of safe to say that in Mauritius it's not as much as a huge occurrence that it happens in a lot of other countries, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen altogether. And while other countries, previously colonized countries, have gone to kind of like, address those lack of addressing those things in legislation, Mauritius has still not done that. What
yeah.
is your work experience with regard to the subject?
So basically, Mauritius, as far as I know, we do not have like really, we don't have laws around consent. And when we talk about consent, it eventually extend to like marriage, and which is why here in Mauritius we don't have any specific legislation that criminalize marital rape. And basically, like when we talk about marital rape, it's telling you that it's fine for your husband to rape you, right? So it says that if you're walking and then a stranger rapes you, fine, you can go and report, you can go to the police. If your like boyfriend does it, you can go, but not your husband, right? So it's a like it's something that need to be changed in the Mauritian context. We have a provision under the Domestic Violence Act, but we don't really have an explicit piece of legislation that says that marital rape is criminalized. And um, I don't really like the term marital rape. I just like to call it rape because it is rape, right? It does not like just because somebody is legally married to you, it does not change the fact that and act without consent.
I'm sorry,
because
like I just wanted to add this one. Like I just say that just because you put a ring on it doesn't make it not rape.
exactly. Yes, exactly. So that's it basically. And I think we like with issues like marital rape, like there were so many people who are opposed to that because I had conversation about it with my friends, and some people were like, what if like how do you prove it? And somebody even told me that you're actually like destroying marriage by saying that marital rape should be criminalized. And that that statement shows like the mindset and the upbringing and how we don't have a consent based culture in Mauritius. That's exactly it basically. And it's just to say like to sum up on that, it's very high. It's very I'm trying to find like a more less strong words to say that, but um
Take your time, don't worry.
yes, it's really absurd that your husband can legally rape you, right? It's like just because you're married, you lose all your bodily autonomy. Like it's like you just got married, now you can't consent, and it's like I don't know why we're very slow with this because um other countries like you mentioned, even in the UK, it's different, right? But in Mauritius, I don't know why we're not ready, or are we actually ready but we're not just changing the law? That's a very good question. But speaking of marital rape, I think that um we need first of all to break that mindset, because how many women actually know that they can actually say no to their husband? Like, do women actually know that they can say no to sex? That's a very good like perspective to think about it, right? Some people, they don't even know that for example, like if you're married and your husband like wants to have sex with you and you don't want to, but he makes you feel guilty about it, and then you have sex, but it's not you did not give your consent, right? But how many women actually know that? Do we actually have the right education tools? Do we act like all women actually empowered? So that's what we're trying to do at she rewrites the law. So trying like to tell women that you know um eve-teasing is not a compliment, it's street harassment. And when you have sex, even if you're married to that person but you did not consent to, it's still rape. So we're trying to do that.
And it makes me wonder that it's not probably just the education of women, right, in heteronormative relationships, but it's also about the education of men to know that consent is important and how to make sure that you got consent and why that is so important. And that kind of education that men also need to have. And like you'll be surprised, but I've known men who qualify themselves as feminists or probably don't want to
Mhm.
call themselves feminists, but they say that they believe in equality, and the whole gist, right? And they'll be like, yeah, well, women are not getting beaten today. They're not getting domestically abused, given that they think that, we live in a society that has, gone past liberating women from the mores of having to be domestically
Mhm.
abused and beaten up. What else do they need? What else should they be
So
liberated from?
yeah, I had like women and also men telling me that they said that I don't know why you're fighting for women's right. Women's in our country, they have rights. Like we respect women, we hold the door for women, but we're not really going to the depth of the issue. Because it's one thing like saying, I'm a feminist, I believe in equality, I respect women. But it's really another thing when you're actually like trying to have sex with your drunk girlfriend, right? It's different. Like there are like such a like huge education gap in terms of how we educate Mauritian women, especially on consent and now marital rape, because it's not just about consent, marital rape, and it's also sex education that we really need to bring a feminist perspective to it. And there are many like there are many gaps and there are many loopholes in the education system that we need to address. And when someone tells me that women already have rights, and I'm like just imagine somebody telling you that, especially if that person is a woman or a girl. Just imagine the social conditioning that person receive, and just imagine how much they need to unlearn what they learned. Like, yeah, it's a massive work. Yeah. And to be able to do that, especially that, we need to start from very beginning. Like we need to start teaching consent to kids from a very young age, because it's not just about sexual consent, but it's consent about other things as well, which we need to teach our kids from a very very young age. And yeah, you were saying something.
No, it's just that when you're speaking, like it was just something that came to my brain.
Oh,
When you
what?
talk, when you talk about consent, and I remember seeing this one scene in, I think it was one of the movies I was watching, and I think it's about bringing consent across every single industry you can think of. Even, for example, the medical industry. I remember there was this one scene in a movie where a doctor had to, sort of diagnose a child who was 5 years of age. And even before the doctor went about to kind of like touch the child to kind of like, I'm going to assess and like have a look at your legs or foot or whatever, she literally popped the question, can I have a look? And such
Exactly.
little instances of consent that is not necessarily just sexual. It's so
Mm-hmm.
important, and we just don't do it.
Exactly.
Things
We
like
just
going at a
don't do
family
it.
party. Yeah, definitely. And like, it doesn't just have to be sexual in nature, right? Even things like you go to a family party and then you get like these uncle and aunties who would just be
Kissing
harassing
you,
your
hugging
kids.
you. Yeah.
Very subtle little things, but it's just part of the
Mhm.
whole thing.
Exactly. There is like so much education, like so much work and so much quality education that we need to teach men. And speaking about teaching men and educating men and stuff, I read a post the other day that says men now do not know how to live with empowered women. And it really struck me. I don't know where, like, I think I stole that on Twitter, like, and I was like, it says everything. Like it just says everything. So I don't know, like, Mauritian society, um but there is like so much work to do, so much work to do. Oh, yeah.
And a lot of self-work as well. And I think that's
Yeah.
what happens in a patriarchal society where self-work eventually becomes a women's priority because of the
Mm-hmm.
nature of self-work becoming a very, like self-aware process. And that's something that a lot of men in turn do not have the privilege to have instinctively, and it comes very naturally to women. But that's also probably my bias. I deeply am convinced that it's not that men can't do it; it's that they were never encouraged to do it.
That's true, you know. Especially yeah, that's very true. And yep, yep.
Well, I guess
That's
like this was like a whole go go.
no, it's fine.
Well, I guess this was like a really like we almost hit like 2 hours with this one. Did you have any like sort of closing statement or anything that you'd like to share, or we might have missed that you wanted to kind of like shed light on?
mm, I think we covered pretty much everything, right? What did what did we actually miss? Um, do you want to like share something, or do you have like any questions? I know you have loads of questions.
Well, I think I'm mostly intrigued with the more actionable part of what to come in the future for us, and for many other people that I know are doing quite a lot of digital activism at the moment. And not just because like you want to be an activist, but just because like there's something that you see and then you kind of like want to share about it, and you just naturally add to the movement, right? And you don't have to call yourself an activist for that. But I'm just more
Mhm.
excited as to how are we going to be translating our work, from just being an online conversation to grassroots level impact. I think
Okay.
we'll call it a wrap if that's all good.
Okay.
Anyway,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I'll
that's
just
okay.
yeah, I'll just chat with you on Instagram. But thank you so much for this. I really, really
Thank you
appreciate it.
so much for doing this. Like,
No,
I'm
I
really
really
looking forward for like I'm really looking forward for like all the episodes. And thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. And I think
well,
we need to
yeah.
talk about things like more often if you're free or you want to chat, so should definitely do that.
No, definitely. And we probably could just do like an Instagram live, obviously like with, blurred and like
Hmm.
closed video and whatnot. But I think it's definitely very interesting. And like I really want to thank you for your time, because I know like we took like an ample 2 hours for this, and it's a Saturday.
It's fine. It's
You could
fine.
have
I
been anywhere
really
else in
enjoy it.
the world. Well, I know your
Okay,
battery is just popping out, so thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon.
thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.